Good evening, everyone. I'm Lori Kinney, Communications Director for People for the American Way, and thank you for joining us on this call with national civil rights leaders and advocates following President Trump's nomination today of Amy Coney Barrett for the U.S. Supreme Court. With us tonight, we have Ben Jealous, President of People for the American Way. We have Nan Aaron, President of Alliance for Justice. We have Vanita Gupta, President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Fatima Goss-Graves, President of the National Women's Law Center. Ben Jealous, over to you.
Thank you all for joining us, and it's great to be here with so many allies in this fight. A vote for Ms. Coney Barrett is a vote to kill health care for millions of Americans. This nomination is being rushed in order to serve the special interests of health insurance companies and drug companies. I just spent the day listening to people with pre-existing conditions, with genetic disorders, lupus, cancer. You know what's clear? Pre-existing conditions know no party. They know no political boundary, and therefore neither should opposition to this nomination. It's being rushed to serve special interests, to destroy Obamacare, to destroy the ACA, to take away protection for pre-existing conditions. And it will impact millions of our neighbors and loved ones. And let's be clear, this is not about the nominee, it's about the nomination. Throughout American history, there have been 4 times before this when president in the last year of their term faced a vacancy in the last 6 months of that term. And in every instance, when a vacancy occurred after July of the last year of a presidential term, no one was put on to the Supreme Court. Donald Trump is breaking with precedent. He's trying to ram this through to destroy coverage for pre-existing conditions, to destroy health care. We've got to stop him. With that, I'm proud to introduce Nan Aaron, our ally in the fight. Nan?
Thanks, Ben. And I'm so proud to be here with you and Fatima and Vanita, great advocates. I'm here on behalf of Alliance for Justice, and what a sad day for all of us and for the country. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's body has not even been laid to rest, and this president has already named her successor. Has he ever looked so desperate? Trump has made clear he wants this seat filled before the election, which also means before oral arguments on the Affordable Care Act. His motives are so obvious. The very fate of our democracy is on the line, as is the health of our people. With 200,000 already dead from COVID-19, the president and Senate Republicans are not taking up the pandemic relief that we need. No, instead, they're advancing a Supreme Court nominee who would take health care away from millions. 7 million people and rising will now have COVID-19 as a pre-existing condition. And without the ACA, there will be nothing to protect their access to health care. Justice Ginsburg herself fought multiple bouts of cancer, another pre-existing condition. And without the ACA, there will be nothing to protect their access. Sorry about that. She fought multiple bouts of cancer, another pre-existing condition, and Trump is ignoring her dying wish to take those protections away from others. The president has never hidden his expectations for Supreme Court nominees. He wants justices who will overturn the Affordable Care Act, who will overturn Roe versus Wade, and will side with him on any potential changes and challenges to this year's election. How can we trust anyone who agrees to be his nominee under those circumstances? That's to say nothing of Amy Coney Barrett's record on a host of troubling issues. Specifically, she clearly meets Trump's litmus test for judges who would overturn the Affordable Care Act and Roe. Barrett has also argued that courts should invalidate the ACA and criticize Chief Justice John Roberts for his decision to uphold Congress's authority to enact large portions of the ACA. And since being nominated to the Seventh Circuit, she has sided with rulings allowing for racial segregation, age discrimination in the workplace, sides with wealthy and powerful over workers and consumers on healthcare, reproductive rights, gun safety, immigration, criminal justice, the environment, and more. She will undo critical rights and protections. Alliance for Justice joins with all Americans who recognize this effort to undermine our democracy, to fight with everything we can. Progressives are ready for the fight. We showed up for Kavanaugh. We've shown up for scores of lower court nominees, and we will be back at it again. This injustice must not come to pass. Thank you. I now turn this over to Vanita Gupta.
Thanks, Nan. Good evening, everyone. Justice Ginsburg's legacy as a principled and dignified defender of justice for all needs to be remembered today, as on all days past over the last week. She really magnified the Supreme Court's importance for millions of Americans and became an icon for so many. And it's an insult to her legacy for the Senate to allow this president to select a justice who threatens every aspect of her legacy and who's going to assail our rights, eliminate healthcare for millions of Americans during a global pandemic, and undermine, upend, and unravel our democracy for generations. Tonight, President Trump made good on his threat. He has once again showed us that he is incapable of picking judges who will safeguard our rights, and instead has demanded and now picked a nominee who will do the exact opposite. He selected somebody with a record who we know is going to undermine our rights, take away health care, and further erode our democratic norms. Corporate interests like health insurance and drug companies and their allies in the US Senate have worked for years to stack the courts to ensure that they work for them, not all of us. And if we're to have courts that actually protect equal justice for everyone, we need a nominee who is willing to stand up to powerful interests and protect the rights of everyday people. Amy Coney Barrett is not that nominee. Right now, a global pandemic has claimed the lives of more than 200,000 people in America, and calls for racial justice and an end to systemic racism and discrimination are intensifying. An election where one candidate has literally declared war on voting is underway. It could not be more clear that our rights and the future of our democracy are at stake. And because Barrett has a record of putting the wealthy and powerful first, confirming her all but ensures the court will continue making decisions that limit Americans' access to health care, deny our voting rights, gut Roe versus Wade, endanger LGBTQ equality, and put corporations ahead of people. Since May, McConnell and Trump have refused to pass legislation that would provide relief to millions of people in America who are hurting right now because of the pandemic. People are dying, unable to access food, being kicked out of their homes, and instead they're rushing up through a nominee who is hostile to health care access when voting for the next president, and a third of the Senate has already begun. And just in time for the Supreme Court arguments a week after the election that will decide the fate of the Affordable Care Act, which we know this case could strip healthcare away from millions of people in America. The stakes for Americans' healthcare could not be higher. If Trump is actually successful, the lawsuit would rip healthcare away from more than 23 million people and remove protections for the 135 million people who have a pre-existing condition, including more than 7 million Americans who have had COVID-19 all during the worst health crisis over a century. It's shameful that Senator McConnell and his caucus priority right now is this: while millions of people in our democracy are hurting, these priorities are cruel, and under no circumstances can the Senate consider Justice Ginsburg's replacement before the inauguration. Thank you. Now let me turn it over to Fatima Gosgraves, President and CEO of the National Women's Law Center.
Thank you, Vanita. We've known who President Trump was going to nominate regardless of their name. because he long ago called for judges who would automatically overturn Roe versus Wade. And he's made clear that his desire to inform the results of the election by filling the seat. And he's been clear that any judge must overturn the Affordable Care Act. So, you know, let's be clear, Amy Coney Barrett is an extreme nominee who would clearly jeopardize our fundamental rights to equality in healthcare, in schools, and at work. And the future she's aiming for would really decimate the right to bodily autonomy. It would rescind healthcare for those who need it most. It would turn back protections for survivors of sexual violence and would undo decades of progress for LGBTQ and for communities and people of color. She was picked because they're confident she would do this. She was picked because they're confident she would overturn the ACA because her writing suggests it. She was picked because they're confident that she would ban abortion because she's exactly what extremist lawmakers have been waiting for. They've been waiting for someone to uphold their outrageous efforts to ban abortion care, and she's already upheld extreme restrictions coming from states. And she's publicly aligned herself with extreme and anti-science beliefs about birth control. And Trump and McConnell are trying to race her nomination through because they know these views are not where the public is. The truth is we shouldn't even need to do the work to dive deeply into her record, especially on this time frame, because there should not be a nominee. People across this country deserve better than a rushed nomination process held against their will. And the most horrifying part of this is the choice to make a mockery of our democracy and diminish the court itself. People are already early voting, and Trump and McConnell racing to push this nominee so that they can fix the election and undemocratically control our lives and futures. It defies the historic legacy of Justice Ginsburg. We deserve a justice who will fight for the civil rights of women and girls and for all of us, and Amy Coney Barrett should not be on the Supreme Court, not in this way, not with her record, not with Trump's criteria, not with this sham process. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. We will go to questions now. In order to raise a question, you can raise your virtual hand. If you can find that option on your screen. Go to the participants option, and we have a question from Zach Cohen. And Zach, your mic is muted. There you go.
Thank you. Thanks for holding this call. I appreciate it. Should senators be meeting with Judge Barrett in advance of her hearings expected this month, or next month rather?
I will say I think it's a decision that's clearly up to each senator. If I were a senator, I would not meet with her. This is a rushed nomination. It's clear that meeting with Amy Barrett Coney Barrett at this moment is merely an effort by Republicans to show that they're going through the motions, but there is really no meaningful conversation, meaningful debate. And I certainly would not want to sit down and meet with her.
I will just add that, you know, this is not a legitimate process or approach. And nothing about it has been legitimate. It hasn't been legitimate to actually name this nominee as people were voting. It hasn't been legitimate to set out a timeline that makes no sense. And it's totally undemocratic. So having these meetings credences and gives it credit that it doesn't deserve.
Thank you. We have a question from Matt Lasso. And you're
there we go. I think it's still popping up. Sorry. Thank you all. I'm intrigued. So I've covered cannabis, marijuana policy, criminal justice reform for Rolling Stone, Vice, Daily Beast, etc., Playboy over the years. I'm intrigued. You guys are coming at this from the civil rights aspect. And you all keep. It seems like your main point is the ACA / Obamacare. I'm intrigued. You know, I've been on the streets with a lot of the BLM.
you have a question?
Well, I'm wondering why, as AOC told me this week, and Ayanna Pressley told me this week, that cannabis policy and drug reform is.
Matt, let me maybe have your question, please.
Well, the question is this just about the Affordable Care Act? Why is this a civil rights move?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
The people of this
You're cutting me off. Bye.
Sure. The people of this country believe that healthcare is a human right. We have, from the very beginning, the civil rights movement has been about really enforcing that vision of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And healthcare is central. And the people of this country overwhelmingly believe that healthcare is a human right. And with that said, I would say that the senators really should be meeting with the people who stand to lose healthcare in each one of their states. In Gardner's state, there are 2.5 million people in Colorado who have pre-existing conditions, all of them threatened. Because if, as we heard from one of them, you may have healthcare today with your job, and then you can lose your job. We're in the midst of a pandemic and a recession in a country where healthcare is tied to your job. For McSally in her state, it's 3 million people. In Arizona, there are 3 million people with pre-existing conditions. And COVID-19 is the latest. Surviving COVID-19 is the latest pre-existing condition. Healthcare is a human right, and that's why the civil rights leaders are fighting for it.
I would just add, Trump has told us time and time again that he is going to nominate a Supreme Court nominee who is, one, opposed to health care protections, and two, will overturn Roe versus Wade. That puts the issue of health care and abortion right in the public space here, and will be the heart and soul of the ongoing conversation that takes place. It's not to say that other issues won't come to the fore, but he has told us he's looking for a candidate who will overturn the Affordable Care Act. The important part of this is that Amy Coney Barry has also said that she disagrees with the act. She criticized Justice Roberts for his decision upholding it. So there's no question but that this has to be a critically important issue given the circumstances in which we find ourselves and the fact that there will be a case argued a week after the election concerning the constitutional fate of that act.
I'm just going to add one more point. We don't actually have to go back very far before we can see what the world looked like before the Affordable Care Act. Insurance companies charged women more just because they were women. Insurance companies considered basically being a woman to be a pre-existing condition. If you had a cesarean, you couldn't get health insurance. People who were raped had pre-existing conditions. So we see it as a gender equality issue, a gender justice issue, and something that we have been fighting for a long time.
Thanks, Fatima. Do we have any other questions from our guests? Any further questions? All right. If there are no further questions, then I will hand it back to Angelus to close this out.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, we are at a moment when special interests have lined up behind Donald Trump to try to do something that's never been done before in American history. Every other time at this point in a presidency, there was a vacancy. We did not see a new Supreme Court justice until the next president, until after the election, until after the inauguration. This is fundamentally a fight to ensure that Roe versus Wade continues to be upheld, and a fight to ensure that every American, every single American can finally rest easy knowing that we are a country that intends to protect and expand healthcare coverage, not attack it and destroy it. I want to thank all of you for joining us.
Thank you all, and have a good night.